morning, rock stars, and welcome back to day 11 of the 12 days of FMQ FAQ. My name is Holly Ann Knight of String and Story, and it is my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Today, I am so excited that we're going to finally get to discuss thread in quite a bit of detail, at least as far as it applies to free motion quilting. Now, as I'm getting started, just a couple of reminders. First of all, if you are here live or watching the replay, do please say hi in the chat or in the comments. I would be delighted to have the opportunity to greet you, and I want to make sure that I can answer any questions you have as we are going along. I also have some reminders from the caption of this video. So first thing in the caption is that you're going to see a little blurb about what we're talking about today, and then a link where you can read more. I always like to provide a resource where you can go dive deeper after our time together, since these are pretty quick videos giving you just a little bit of an overview. Underneath that blog link, you're going to find a link for a very special invitation. Starting on Monday, these 11 a.m. lives are going to be part of the Quilting Plan Challenge, and we're going to spend 5 days together talking about how the heck you decide what to quilt where on your quilt. So if you have a bunch of flimsies and you really want to be able to quilt them yourself, but you're struggling to know how to choose different motifs and how to customize your quilting to really suit your quilt top, the next week's challenge is the challenge for you. It is totally free and it is here on YouTube, but I've made a really nifty workbook that I'd like to share with you. So make sure you register with your email address in order to have that delivered straight to your inbox. Finally, if you have not already, do please hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you've hit subscribe already, when our time is done, do please share this video and other videos from this series with your quilting friends on your social media or in your quilting Facebook groups so that we can welcome even more folks into the Quilting Rockstars community and so that even more folks can start their journey to quilt with confidence. All right, let's get started. Good morning, Alicia, Sandy, Karen, Yvonne. I am so thrilled that all of you are here. Hello, Eleni. I'm so glad. Your hopping foot came as well as your gloves. That's so exciting. Congratulations. All right, let's jump in. Today we are talking about thread. I've mentioned before, I am sure over the course of the last couple of weeks together, that my go-to thread is Aurifil 50 weight. I am absolutely obsessed with this thread. It is made with beautiful Egyptian long staple cotton. It is finished with a very thin paraffin coating to minimize lint. Of course, it's cotton fiber, so there's going to be some, but it's going to minimize lint, increase shine, and increase the strength of the thread itself. 50 weight is a very, very fine thread, as you can see. Very, very fine thread. And so I love this thread because it's going to just sink like butter into our quilt top. So we can put a lot of quilting on a single quilt without getting a lot of extra bulk or stiffness. And that's really important to me because I am a very more is more kind of quilter. All right. Another thread that's very good for free motion quilting is the Aurifil 40 weight. Note that this has a green spool instead of the orange one, right? It's a little bit thicker. Let's see if you can actually tell side by side if I hold these up that it's thicker. I don't know if this is going to show up on camera or not. Like I can see it here in real life, but can y'all still see it? Let's put it this way. Can y'all see that top one, this one here is the 50 weight. So it's a little bit finer than the other. Okay. And then another very common weight is going to be Aurifil 28 weight. This is going to be the thickest of the three. This thread is particularly good if you're wanting to create a lot of texture and let the quilting stand out and have sections of your quilt where the quilting is really the star of the show. Okay. Notice all three of those are navy. The only real difference, or slightly different shades of navy, but the only real difference is your thread thickness. Now, my personal favorite is Aurifil 50 weight. Now, I mentioned Aurifil in general, I love because it's made of that beautiful long staple cotton. It's finished really well. It's going to be very strong, very shiny, really beautiful on your quilt. But why 50 weight particularly, especially if maybe you're not like me, maybe you want to have more all over designs on your quilting. And so you're like, well, does it matter that the thread is so fine if I'm not going to be quilting it to death? And I would argue yes, especially if you are a new free motion quilter. The other key reason why I recommend Aurifil 50 weight is because the tension balances very easily with this thread. So if you are working with this thread and you're going to adjust your tension, as we discussed at the beginning of this week, the fact that it's a very fine thread makes it a lot easier to make that twist of threads land in the center of your quilt. All right. So any questions thus far? Let me say this. Any questions thus far about why cotton thread, why Aurifil, why 50 weight? Those kind of first key questions. While y'all are typing, welcome Wendy, Susie, Jan, Janet, Nancy. Thrilled to see y'all. So glad that you are here. Wonderfully exciting. All right, I will just mention with the 50 weight, the official recommendation from Aurifil is to use a size 12 needle. When I am free motion quilting, as we discussed during the supply section last week, I use a size 16 needle as my go-to. If I'm doing something like a panel, I might go down to a 14. If I'm doing something like a Bonnie Hunter quilt, very traditional quilt with a lot of seams, I will quickly go up to an 18, okay? So the size 12 needle works really well with this weight of thread, but for the speed at which we're going to be working with free motion quilting, I like the larger eye and the stronger needle body, the stronger like shank or shaft of the larger needle sizes. Okay, just reduce thread breaks, reduce needle breaks, etc. All right. The next question after, what thread and what needle that I get the most often is how do I decide on what color of thread? And this is honestly, this is the simplest test in the entire world, right? Y'all will not be able to see the thread up against this because I'm far away from the camera, but you'll get to see the idea of what I'm doing, all right? So I like to unspool a good, 12, 24, 36 inches of thread, right? And if you come into String and Story on Main, and if you're local, please do this. This is so fun. So sometimes we have folks come in, they'll bring in their quilt top and they're like, I need thread. And we get to spread the quilt top out on the cutting table. And I raid my beautiful thread drawer, which I cannot conveniently show you, unfortunately. But I have basically every thread color that we carry in the store. I have an open one here in my like magical thread drawer, right? And so we raid in there for some ideas and we unspool them across like this, okay? So here's why I do this. I like to just lay it across the quilt top and I like to lay it across a long section of the quilt top because I want to see that thread go across as many of the colors and prints and sections of the quilt as possible because I want to see how that thread looks. But it's very important to unspool it because a very fine strand of thread looks very different than how thick and dark this navy looks when it's still on the spool, right? Only as we begin to unspool can we really see that color and see the relationship of color and thickness, right? If I were to take a yarn, like a true like knitting yarn, right, like a worsted weight of this navy and lay it across a quilt, it's going to look a lot darker and a lot heavier than just putting a strand of thread across it, right? And it's the same principle with laying that spool on there as it looks way more overbearing than if we actually look at what are those stitches going to look like. You can even see this thread up against my body right now, right? And this is a really dark navy color, okay? So I usually will pick several different colors that I kind of pull from the quilt, and then I will lay them across and make sure that you touch the lightest part of the quilt and the darkest part of the quilt so you can see where your highest contrast spots are going to be, right? So a quilt like this, we've got navy down in one corner and we have white in the other. So I have to decide pretty much any color I choose, there's going to be high contrast somewhere, right? And I need to decide which way I prefer that contrast to go, okay? For this quilt behind me, strangely enough, I did not manage to pull it out. This quilt behind me I did with ye old favorite, Aurifil 2600. This is a beautiful dove gray. This is the color the shop is painted. It's this like almost white silvery color, right? Not quite white. It's the color that my hubster is currently painting our house. We love this color, okay? And I think this is really interesting because when you look at this, right, you're like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be so light up against the navy. And that's a normal reaction. That's what it looks like, right? But even with it stitched, it doesn't look like that, right? You can't even see the stitching lines from over there because these fine little stitches have just sunk like butter into my quilt. And where I've gone over it multiple times, you can see it a little bit more, right? That line actually shows up on camera. I went over that about 4 or 5 times in my retracing process, right? But the rest of the time, really what we're getting from this is texture more than color, okay? So generally, I end up choosing kind of a mid-range color for my quilting. This is on the lighter side, but it just, it matches so well with so many different things. Unless I'm quilting a quilt that is all darks or all lights, all right? Another thing that I like to think about is I like to think about variegated thread. And I have been on a whole variegated thread kick this year. If you're familiar with the Aurifil Color Builders program, which is their thread subscription, it's all about variegated. And so it's been a wonderful and kind of creative kick in the bum to use more variegated thread. And what I've discovered is that I love it. It's a really wonderful way to get texture that feels a little bit more like changing thread colors without the work of changing thread colors, right? And oftentimes for, most colors, Aurifil has a more stark, high contrast variegated, and then a more subtle, lower contrast variegated. And I pulled out a couple of examples of that here, just so you could see them. I think I've got a pink one here as well, yes. Where's my blue? I don't know where my blue is at the moment, right? And depending on the project will depend on which one I choose, right? But the same rules apply. Make sure you unspool it and lay it across and see how it blends in. So I love that it just adds a little bit of shimmer, especially these really subtle variegateds. It just adds a little bit of shimmer to your quilt top, but without being overbearing and without, this is key, without having to change thread color, okay? If you have any questions about color or choosing thread color, please, please, please drop them in the chat. I do just want to take a moment to speak to changing thread colors. Do I change thread colors? Sometimes. There's a key principle that I generally apply to whether or not I'm going to spend time changing my threads when I'm quilting a project. And that generally is, am I going to have to break thread anyway? Right? Which incidentally, this was a great example of a quilting plan like that. So let me see if I can get a good angle? Okay, so yeah, that gives you a good angle on, whoop, I'm trying to help you see the quilting on this so you can see kind of the complexity of the quilting on this quilt behind me in case you are not familiar with this quilting plan of mine. This had ruler work, this had free motion, it's got all the things going on, right? So this is actually a great example of this principle, even though on this particular example, I did not choose to change thread colors. My general rule of thumb is if I'm going to have to break thread anyway, I might as well consider changing thread colors. If, however, I'm going to be able to quilt the whole project without having to break thread, I'm not necessarily going to create thread breaks for the sake of thread color changes, unless I have a really particular reason that I'm going to do that. But just day in and day out, quilts that I am quilting for general use or for general hanging, that is my guideline. So let me see if I can actually grab this other example really quick. Same quilt pattern. This is also a Lanterns of Hope quilt. I should have brought it over before I started. Oops, throwing things on the floor. My specialty, as we discovered yesterday. All right, so the same quilt pattern, different colorway, right? This is a panel, actually. Lanterns of Hope panel, right? Same quilting plan. But this time, I was doing it on my domestic. I was actually teaching a class with this. And every time I have had to change thread, break thread anyway, I've also changed thread color, right? So you'll see this is a pink variegated here. We've got some turquoise up in here, green, red around the edges. So I'm actually pulling all of the colors from the quilt itself into the threads. Okay, so in this instance, I was like, well, I'm going to be breaking thread anyway to move around this quilt. This time, we're going to change thread colors, okay? So that's my general rule of thumb. If I'm going to be breaking thread anyway, I will consider using multiple thread colors to add pizzazz. If I'm not going to have to break thread to execute my quilting plan, then I'm much less likely to bother changing thread colors because why create more work unless I have a specific creative vision, okay? Let's see. Susan says, is Aurifil having supply chain issues? Should we stock up on our favorites? I have not heard of any new supply chain issues from Aurifil. If I hear a different word on that, I will let you know. But so far, so good. If you have ordered something and you've seen a delay, the country of Italy basically closes for the month of August. It's when they take their like countrywide summer vacation. So the Aurifil factory is closed this month. So if you have ordered something directly from Aurifil, or if your shop has ordered something from Aurifil and it's taking a long time to come in, it probably is more related to the fact that the factory is on vacation. And when things start back up in September, things will be flowing again. Yeah, just a little peek behind the scenes. That happens every year. It's really interesting every year because there's always a big push to make sure there's enough like 2311, 2600, some of those common colors until production starts again in September. Marie says, I love all the thread I've gotten from Color Builders, right? Oh my gosh, will you hand me one of those boxes actually? And I will preview this month's. I'm going to tear this one apart so you won't get it back. This is this month for those who are in Color Builders. If you did not sign up at the beginning of the year with Color Builders and you just want to get your hands on the thread, we do have these boxes available in the shop. And this is this month. How obsessed are we? Like, and this is already listed in the shop. So if your heart is singing and you immediately need this thread in your possession, you can go get it now. Okay. Love it. Yes, the Mediterranean generally closes. So Elena, you can back me up on this. Thank you. I appreciate that. Shelly says, do you change the bobbin thread color also if you change the top thread? Would the back look a little weird? So I generally do, because for all the reasons we talked about with tension, right? If you've got a different color top thread and bottom thread, it can be harder to tell if your tension is balanced. It can be harder to tell. Alicia, babe, there's one waiting for you in the shop. Come get it. Come get it. Because you do. I thought of you as I put them out. It can be harder to tell if your tension is balanced because you can see the opposite thread through the needle hole, right? And so personally, that freaks me out a little bit, even though once you wash the quilt and everything kind of shrinks up, it's no longer a problem. I just prefer to get out ahead of it, and I change my bobbin thread color. Now, that being said, Kate Brennan works at Orifil, does not. She's like, whatever I have is what's going in the bobbin. That is the back of the quilt for a reason. If it's going to bother you to have different thread colors showing up on the back that don't necessarily coordinate, then I would recommend using a busy back, right? So get, a big floral back that has all the colors. So for example, this is actually a wonderful example. There's a lot of pinks and blues going on the front of this quilt, right? I've got this lovely little strawberry print, and y'all are, for reference, about 3 feet from this quilt that I'm holding up. So you're not very far away. Admittedly, it is a camera, so it's a little bit different than the human eye. But can you see the different thread colors? Probably not, or not very much, right? Not as much as you might think. So just simply using a printed back, any thread colors, it's similar to like retracing, because I do a lot of I'll retrace over existing stitching lines, or I'll travel in the ditch. And so my stitching in the ditch may not be even on the back because I just used it to travel. I didn't actually stitch in the ditch for the sake of stitching in the ditch. You get a backing that coordinates with the threads you're using, that's nice and busy, and it all just vanishes, and then it doesn't matter anyway. Yep. How do you sign up for Color Builder? So Shelly, you would be signing up kind of in a backlog. So you'd have to pay for the year thus far, and you would get the first 8 boxes, which are all beautiful. Oh, so beautiful, as well as the applique block of the month. So if that's interesting to you, you can jump over to stringandstory.com and do the online education drop-down menu, and there's a link there, or you can email me at hello@stringandstory.com, and I can send you the info if you want to jump in with us mid-year. We're making, actually, I'll show you the block of the month, because why not? We're on day 11, and I'm officially going down rabbit holes. I've done such a good job all the way through of not going down rabbit holes during these, and here we are. But this is the Color Builders block of the month we're making. It's called Botanical Applique, and it is stunning. Okay. All right. Susie, I agree. I love busy backs, and I cannot lie. I love busy backs. I do not use them often enough because I inevitably have extra solid fabric hanging around at the shop. But when I get to use a good print back, chef's kiss. So good. All right, rock stars. Any final questions about thread? As a review, I recommend Orifil 50 weight as my go-to for free motion quilting. It is strong. It is fine. It's going to sink like butter down into your quilting. In order to choose your thread color, lay that thread out across the quilt top so you can see how the contrasts work to decide the color that you like best. Sometimes I'm very surprised by this, actually. Here recently, I was laying thread across an Astor quilt that Darcy made, and I really wanted to use this like light yellow quilt to pull, or thread to pull from one of the other colors, but it was a blue background. And I realized that if I used yellow thread, you wouldn't really be able to see the thread, but it would give the whole quilt like a weird green glow. And I was like, oh, well, now we can't do that. I got to use something else, right? So make sure that you do that, lay several colors across, and then make your decision. Make sure you've got a good light, a dark, and a few mediums. It'll give you a good idea of what's going on. And if you are local to Duluth, you're like, I don't have a lot of Aurifil thread yet. Like, how can I do this? Of course you can use your color card, though you can't unspool that. But if you're local to us, you can come in and I will pull from my magic drawer and you can lay it all out. All right. I do recommend, as I mentioned before, a size 16 needle, generally speaking. And as you continue on your free motion quilting journey, if you want to add a little bit more pop to your quilting, you could use something more like 40 weight or 28 weight or Aurifil 43 for a slightly thicker stitch. All right. Any last questions? Drop them in the chat. Rockstars, thank you so much for joining me today for this little chat about thread for free motion quilting. As always, there is a link in the caption of this video if you want to go dive deeper and read more about this topic. And I would love to see you next week for the Quilting Plan Challenge. There's a sign up link again in the caption of this video so that I can send you that amazing workbook directly to your inbox. And then we will be continuing on Monday with these lives. So tomorrow is our last day of the 12 days of FMQ FAQ. We're going to take a breather for the weekend. And then starting on Monday, we will kick off our 5 days of the Quilting Plan Challenge. Last but not least, if you have not already, do please hit subscribe to our channel. And if you have subscribed already, take a moment instead to share a link to this video or another video from this series with your quilting friends in your quilting Facebook groups and on your social media so that we can add more folks to the Quilting Rockstars community and get more quilters on their journey to free motion quilt with confidence. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Have a great one.